It started like any ordinary day in the sky. Until fire burst from the engine, the runway turned into a battlefield, and hundreds of lives hung in the balance. These are the terrifying moments when pilots had seconds to decide: fight the flames or fall from the sky. 10. The flaming sky over the UK Isle. A quiet corner of the English countryside, hobbyist plane spotter Tony Johnson was setting up his camera, hoping to capture a peaceful cargo landing. What he got instead was raw, unfiltered chaos. A massive Boeing 747 cargo jet from Kalita Air, en route from Germany, was descending toward the runway when it suddenly erupted into fire. A thunderous blast ripped through the morning air. One of the engines was engulfed in flames. From his vantage point, Tony instinctively hit record. The sight was surreal. Thick black smoke trailing behind a flaming jet engine, the aircraft desperately trying to land. Later, Tony's footage would hit headlines across the world. Experts believe the likely cause was a bird strike, an unfortunately common hazard in aviation. Modern jet engines suck in massive volumes of air, and when a bird or even a small object is pulled in, it can cause catastrophic damage. Despite the terrifying explosion, the pilots managed to bring the plane down safely. A miracle, considering what could have happened. 9. Snowstorm Slam, Southwest Flight 1248. On a snowy evening in Chicago, Flight 1248 from Baltimore approached the runway at Midway Airport. Visibility was low, the snow was heavy, but the crew pressed on. The Boeing jet touched down, only to overshoot the slick runway. It plowed through a protective barrier, crashed through a perimeter fence, and came to a halt at the intersection of 55th Street on top of a family's car. Miraculously, all 5 passengers inside survived, shaken but alive. An investigation revealed a chilling error. The pilots failed to engage the reverse thrust system properly, which would have helped slow the plane after touchdown. That critical mistake led to the harrowing overrun, an event that could have ended in tragedy, if not for a twist of fate. 8. DC-3's breathtaking spiral and comeback. Not all emergencies end in destruction. In one extraordinary case, a Douglas DC-3 was climbing out after takeoff when something went terribly wrong. At just 900 feet, the plane rolled sharply to the left, beginning a dramatic spiral descent. But instead of crashing, the pilot somehow regained control and brought the aircraft back to Earth, landing on the same runway it had just left, only 4 minutes earlier. The gear was still up. There were no injuries. It was one of the calmest emergency landings witnesses had ever seen, more like a ballet than a disaster. 7. DHL disaster in Costa Rica. At Juan Santa Maria International Airport, a DHL Boeing 757 cargo jet had just taken off, bound for Guatemala, when the crew radioed back, "We've got hydraulic failure, requesting emergency landing." They circled back. Everything seemed fine. The plane landed. Then the unthinkable happened. As the plane touched down, it veered violently, broke apart on the tarmac, and split in two. The tail ripped off entirely. Emergency crews scrambled, dousing the wreck with foam to prevent a fuel fire, and building makeshift barriers to stop leakage into the airport's drainage system. Miraculously, the pilot and co-pilot, the only two people on board, walked away without a scratch. The plane didn't survive, but the people did. 6. The door flew open mid-flight. High above the Colombian Amazon, a Boeing 737-200 from Aerosucre took off from Me-2 on a cargo run. Minutes after takeoff, chaos erupted in the cabin. The main door had flung wide open mid-flight. While the door remained attached to the plane, it was gaping open for nearly the entire flight. The wind roared. The cabin pressure destabilized. The captain turned the plane around for an emergency landing back in Me-2. Later, the pilot, Julio Consuegra, was dismissed from the airline under controversial circumstances. The incident became more scandalous when the airline's director, Fernando San Clemente, was linked to 3 cocaine labs. The drama wasn't just in the air. It was on the ground, too. Fire over Denver, United Flight 328. It was supposed to be a routine flight. United Airlines 328, bound for Honolulu, carrying 240 passengers from Denver. Just moments after takeoff, passengers heard a deafening boom and looked out their windows in horror. The right engine had exploded. Fiery debris rained from the sky, scattering across Denver's suburbs. A massive metal engine cowling crashed into a front yard. Smoke trailed behind the aircraft as passengers braced for impact, not knowing if they'd survive. Inside the cockpit, the pilots kept calm. With one engine destroyed and the other working overtime, they turned the Boeing 777-200 back toward Denver. Within 20 minutes of the explosion, they managed to land the aircraft safely, without a single injury. But here's the twist. The replacement aircraft United used to fly the passengers to Honolulu. It was another Boeing 777-200, one that had suffered a nearly identical engine failure years earlier. That coincidence sparked a massive class action lawsuit against the airline. 4. Flash of fire, Royal Air Maroc's close call. Just after takeoff from Casablanca, a Royal Air Maroc Boeing 737-800 was climbing steadily when a flash of fire lit up the sky from one of its engines. Inside the cockpit, alarms blared. The crew didn't hesitate. They throttled back, applied reverse thrust, and brought the plane back down, all within minutes. The landing was swift, controlled, and mercifully uneventful, but what followed raised eyebrows. Neither the airline nor Moroccan civil aviation authorities said a word. No press release, no update. Silence. To this day, it's still unclear if the plane was evacuated or if passengers disembarked normally. But one thing is certain. It could have ended very differently. 3. Bird strike abort, Spirit Airlines Flight 3044. At Newark Liberty International, 105 passengers and 7 crew members were aboard a Spirit Airlines Airbus A320, preparing for takeoff to Fort Lauderdale. The engines roared, the aircraft accelerated, but then came a sickening thud. A bird had slammed into one of the engines. Immediately, the pilots aborted takeoff. The plane slowed from 60 knots and came to a stop roughly 500 meters down the runway. Then came the call to the tower. We need emergency evacuation procedures. Passengers scrambled out through slides as emergency crews rushed in. 3 passengers and 1 crew member sustained minor injuries during the chaotic escape. But once again, tragedy was narrowly avoided. 2. Burning wing, Singapore Airlines near disaster. 2 hours into a transcontinental flight from Singapore to Milan, the pilots of a Singapore Airlines Boeing 777 received a chilling warning: engine oil pressure dropping. They made the decision to return to Singapore, flying back slowly and carefully, but just as the wheels touched down, the right engine ignited, and the fire began spreading across the entire wing. Inside, panic rose. Passengers were ordered to remain seated. The cabin filled with heat. It took fire crews 5 agonizing minutes to arrive and extinguish the flames. Photos later showed the wing, blackened, warped, and half-melted. Incredibly, no one was harmed. But those 5 minutes were a lifetime for the people on board. Number 1. Blaze over Bogotá, UPS Flight 767. Nothing strikes fear like fire in the sky, and that's exactly what happened over Bogotá, Colombia, when a UPS Boeing 767 cargo jet took off from El Dorado International Airport. Shortly after takeoff, the crew declared an emergency. One of the engines was on fire, but the airspace was crowded. There was no immediate place to land. So the pilots did the impossible. They stayed in the air for almost an hour, circling and stabilizing the aircraft while ground crews cleared the runways. Smoke filled the sky. Emergency responders lined the landing zone, foam at the ready. Finally, the plane came down in a flawless landing. The cargo, and more importantly the crew, were unharmed. The cause? Internal engine damage. But to the people watching from below, it looked like the jet was falling apart mid-air. Closing note. These are more than aviation incidents. They're stories of instinct, grit, and moments where one decision separates life from death. For every fireball in the sky, there's a pilot fighting to bring it home. And in the chaos, humanity's courage flies highest. Bonus Case 1. A calm descent in chaos, the miracle of the A320. Early morning at a bustling airport in Europe, a commercial Airbus A320 had barely lifted off when the pilots noticed a severe engine vibration. Passengers felt the aircraft shudder as a loud knocking echoed through the fuselage. A quick glance at the control panel told the pilots everything. They were losing thrust fast. They didn't panic. Instead, they calmly performed a maneuver known in aviation as a return-to-field emergency descent. The plane circled back while descending rapidly but under control. With one engine operating at minimal capacity and the other failing, the aircraft touched down with breathtaking smoothness. Witnesses on the ground wouldn't have known anything was wrong. That's how flawless it looked. But the pilots later admitted they were seconds away from declaring total engine failure. This wasn't just a landing. It was a quiet miracle. Bonus Case 2. The night the lights went out. Cockpit in darkness. Imagine this. A Boeing 737 at cruising altitude, flying through a thunderstorm over the Midwest. Suddenly, a bolt of lightning strikes the fuselage, the cabin lights flicker, and then go completely dark. The entire cockpit loses electrical power. For 2 full minutes, the plane is flying blind. No radar, no navigation, no internal comms. The only thing between 180 lives and catastrophe is the raw skill of the flight crew. Using basic instrument backups and sheer instinct, the pilots regain manual control and slowly descend through dense cloud. Finally, they break through the storm and spot the airport's lights. The landing is rough, but safe. It's later discovered that the lightning fried a vital electrical junction. Still, the pilots' ability to keep their composure saved everyone on board. Bonus Case 3. Terror at takeoff, when the nose gear failed. A domestic jetliner in Canada was taxiing toward the runway. The weather was perfect, but as the aircraft lifted off, the nose suddenly dipped hard. Screams filled the cabin. The nose landing gear had failed. It never locked into place. The pilots were faced with a choice: circle until fuel ran low and hope the gear fixed itself, or perform a high-speed gear-up landing with the nose exposed. They chose courage. Foam trucks lined the runway. Emergency teams stood ready. The jet came in, touched the rear wheels down, and then slowly lowered its nose onto the asphalt. Sparks flew. Metal screeched, but the plane didn't break apart. It slid safely to a stop. Applause erupted inside the cabin. The captain later said, "We didn't land the plane, we guided it to a safe finish." Epilogue. The reality of the skies. Behind every emergency landing is a story not just of failure, but of resilience. Of teams trained for the unthinkable. Of passengers who watched their lives flash before their eyes, only to stand on solid ground again, grateful, humbled, alive. For every flaming engine and blown-out door, there are pilots who rise to the occasion and prove why they're among the most highly trained professionals in the world. Because when everything goes wrong, they're the ones who make sure you still go home.